Hey there, you got a story for me? I heard that you do. Well, if so, send it to me directly by email. You can send it to contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Oh, hey there, everyone. Good evening. I'm so glad you could make it. Now, it's a beautiful and unseasonably warm day here in Southwest Ohio, so the windows are open. Just letting you know in case you hear some birds or cars or could be some cows mooing in the distance. Who knows? It's rural Ohio. Anything can happen. Anyway, soak up the ambiance and go grab your snackage and get settled up. Our first stop on the journey tonight into Sasquatch Valley will be in North Carolina. From there, we're going to head a little west and a little north to the aptly named Hell's Canyon. Are you ready? Yeah, me too. Let's go. Dear Nance and Sasquatch, my name is Michelle, and this encounter is not mine. It is my husband's and my son's. This takes place the first week of September 2000, 3 weeks prior to my son's birthday. Let me give you a little bit of background on where we live. Back in 2000, we had been living here approximately 3 years, or maybe a little over. We lived 3 miles off of a main road, and when we moved here, everything was dirt roads. It was our road, the next road, and then you got to the main road. The second road you have to take to get to the main road was covered in pine trees all the way up until about a half mile before the end of the road on the left. They had recently logged within the last 6 months, I would say. My husband and son said their goodbyes to his family there. Then they got in the car to come down the road, which was only 3 miles away. My husband was the first to see it. He looked to the left because we always had to slow down there because there were so many deer, and I've totaled cars there, and we didn't need to total another one. My husband said at first glance it just looked like maybe a couple tree stumps or more, like where they had logged and maybe pushed them up to the side to remove later or to burn. But then he thought, no, it might be a bear, because we had recently heard of sightings of bears, and yes, we do have bear here in North Carolina. Well, thinking it was bear, he pointed it out to our son. He had recently visited the zoo, and he loved all the animals. Given this fact, my husband thought, well, maybe he could tell his friends he got to see a bear in the wild. Then all of a sudden, the stumps, or what my husband had thought were stumps, started to move. It got up and kind of morphed into something on 4 legs. So in his mind, he's thinking the only thing he can associate that with is that it's a bear. But the movement just wasn't right. Meanwhile, since he had pointed it out to our son is hollering, "Bear, bear, Daddy, a bear." My husband said that he told him to be quiet. He wasn't sure if that was a bear. Meanwhile, this bear creature started coming toward the car. It was approximately 70 feet from the car, and it started coming towards the car on all 4s, almost spider-like, my husband said. Then, before it got too close to the car, right before you get to the incline, it stood up on 2 legs and began running toward them on 2 legs. Not 4, but 2, and not clumsily like a bear either. It continued running straight for our red car. He said he did not know why it had seen them or noticed them, but it did. My husband said he was almost holding his breath. He was afraid if this big creature hit the car, it would flip over. Knowing he had to protect our son, he started to try to drive off. The creature ended up coming toward the back of the car. My husband said that he does not know how to this day that it did not hit it and flip them, or at least spin them around. Needless to say, by the time they got home and walked through the front door, my son was screaming, "We saw a bear! We saw a bear!" And the bear about hit us. My husband was white as a ghost, and I looked at him, and I'm like, "What happened to you? Did the bear scare you that bad?" I admit, I laughed a little bit. Now, waiting on a response from my husband, he was just, well, I don't know if it was shock or what, but he just looked at me and said, "That was not a bear. I have never seen a bear do anything like that." Then he told me the story that I just related to you and the Sasquatch. Of course, I asked him what color the fur or the hair was. He said it was a brown bark color, shorter on the top and at the face and longer, free-flowing on the arms and legs. That's the reason he had mistaken it for a tree stump. It also had a little bit of red, more on the top of the head, which he said was like an egg shape. Now, the body size, he compared it to a double-door refrigerator plus another half. If it had stood straight up, he said that it would have been at least 7 feet tall, maybe taller. Well, that's my husband and my son's encounter, or at least one of my son's encounters, and he does still remember it to this day. If you would like, I will send in the other possible encounters. I really wanted to tell this to somebody. It has laid with my husband for several years, and still to this day, when I say, "You know you saw a Bigfoot," he tells me, "I saw something." I have been hesitant to share this with anyone, especially in a semi-public manner such as this. Once I have shared this with other people in the past, well, I'll just say that more than one of those people suddenly were too busy to talk to me ever again. I think in today's term, the term is ghosted. I was ghosted very often once I shared this with people. But I'm now 71 years old. I'm divorced and I live alone. I have little to no need for friends anymore, and I don't care what people think. I'm also retired. This means I don't give a hootenanny what anyone else might think or say, and no one can hold my feet to the fire over my employment. Now, this was back in 1995. I was following some elk up through Hell's Canyon. I made camp, I believe it was about 4,000 feet one night. My camp setup was just a sleeping roll and a light tarp if it rained. I kept it simple. That night, I was awakened by some awful howling noises. Now, these didn't jive with anything that I had ever heard, and I had heard a lot in my time. These howls came from really big lungs. You could hear it. You could almost think they were being broadcast by an amplified bullhorn somewhere out there in the dark. This wasn't some elk bugling. This was nothing like that. I sat up in my bedroll in the dark to listen. I didn't know what it was, but that didn't make me afraid. I was just curious. It really sounded a long way off from where I was, but at the same time it was clear, loud, and strong. This went on for several minutes. Then it went quiet, and after a bit I went back to sleep. Next day I followed some elk to a craggy part of a mount. It was rocky and loose up there. I was glassing down the whole area when I saw something really weird. I noticed that the elk were giving a great big gray rock a very wide berth, and they were looking at it nervously. I zoomed in on the rock. It took a second to make it out, because I was looking for a rock, not a living thing. I was in the half-mile range from it, but with my 10x magnification, it was like it was about 70 or 80 yards in front of me. Not like I could count nose hairs on it, but I had a good look at it. Now, those elk came down from the rock ridge, and immediately they parted and shied away from it. It was like watching the parting of the Red Sea. I just couldn't figure it out at first. I thought maybe there was some fool hunter up there in some kind of a ghillie who got caught and decided to hunker down when the elk came up over the ridge. But as soon as I thought it, I knew that made no sense. So I glassed the figure over again. I noticed there was no weapon, no pack, nothing. But I did make out arms and legs that were all folded up, but they looked wrong. The arms were wrapped tight around the legs. I couldn't see where the eyes were looking exactly, but I saw there were dark spots that were there for the eyes. I was still trying to figure out what the devil I was looking at when one of the younger elk was either curious or stupid, and it walked too close. Bam! That figure moved like lightning and grabbed the young elk. It had it by the neck and twisted it up like it was a little pretzel stick. The rest of the elk herd started stampeding away. It stood up, and I actually took the binoculars away from my eyes and rubbed my eyes with my other hand, because I thought I must be seeing things. This thing was tall. It looked freaky tall, even at that distance with the binoculars. It bent from a standing position and hoisted the young elk up over its shoulders to rest on its neck, front legs on one side of the neck hanging down and the back legs on the other side hanging down. It then wrapped one hand around each set of legs. It adjusted the weight on its shoulders. I watched it walk around a big rock ridge, then it went up and over. It was just a moving dot in my binoculars at the very end. Now, the whole time, I watched this in absolute disbelief. I kept watching because I was sure it had to be another hunter in a suit. But I had never seen a ghillie suit anything like that. And who wears fur in the summer? It was hairy, not some vintage camouflage. It was like nothing I've ever seen, since or before. And no one I ever met in my life could just snap an elk's neck, not even a young one. I was a little more on guard that night while camping, but I heard nothing, and I saw nothing. Now, I'm not saying that the howls I heard the first night were definitely from that creature, but I find it weird that I heard something the night before that I'd never heard before, and it was just the night before that I saw something that I've never seen before as well, and I never heard or seen either things the rest of the years that I hunted. I believe with all my heart that I saw some type of a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Sabe, or whatever you want to call them. I believe that's what I saw that afternoon. I don't know what else it could have possibly been. I didn't believe in them before, and there are days I'm still not sure that I believe in them, but I believe what I saw. I hope that can make some kind of sense. I know the thing that threw me first was its color. It was a gray stone color, but a little bit rusty. It blended just right with the rocky terrain up there. Now, most times when I've read about a Bigfoot, they're always brown, red, blonde, or black-haired. But this thing, it was the color of the stone of Hell's Canyon. I wish I could give you a better description, but all I can tell you is it was incredibly tall and powerfully built. I saw long arms, and its hair was the color of stones and rocks. That's about the best I can tell you from my distance, even with binoculars. I left Hell's Canyon the next day, and I got no elk. I chose other hunting grounds after that. I never went back. Thank you. You can use my name. I don't care. Signed, Daniel Ludlow from Boise, Idaho. All right. Well, as always, a big thank you to those who took the time to send those stories in. And to our first submitter, who, by the way, did not give me a name to use. Let me promise you something. You don't ever need to ask if I want you to send other experiences in. Just go ahead and send them in. You know we want to hear them. All right, everyone. Well, once again, I have loved both of these stories tonight, and I hope you did as well. It was a good journey to Sasquatch Valley, I think. But I do think that's going to do it for tonight. Thanks for staying with me to the end. You know, it's always better with your company. But don't worry, we'll be getting together again real soon in just a few days. But until then, please, always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.